Maya rubbed her eyes as she glanced at the clock. Another 12-hour shift was almost over, but her mind refused to rest. The hospital was noisy, filled with the sound of beeping machines, rushing feet, and distant calls. She felt the familiar ache in her shoulders and the tightness in her chest. Being a nurse was rewarding, yes, but it came with sacrifices she could not ignore. Her apartment was small, just enough space for a bed, a worn-out sofa, and a kitchen that smelled faintly of old food. Bills were stacked neatly on the counter: electricity, water, rent, and each one felt like a mountain she could not climb. Her paycheck barely covered necessities, and she often had to skip meals to save a few dollars. Still, she reminded herself she had a purpose. She was here to help people, and no amount of exhaustion could change that. As she prepared a patient's medicine, a sudden announcement came through the intercom, code red. Emergency in trauma room 3. Critical blood transfusion needed. Maya froze. Her hands tightened around the syringe. She had just completed a long shift, her body begging for rest, but the words on the intercom made her heartbeat quicken. Maya moved quickly, slipping past doctors and other nurses who were already rushing. Trauma room 3 was crowded, full of tension and fear. A man lay on the stretcher, pale and barely breathing, while monitors beeped erratically. His clothes were torn and blood-stained. The doctor called for a blood type urgently. Maya glanced down at her own ID badge. She was the only nurse in the room with the matching blood type. "Can you donate?" the doctor asked without looking up, urgency in his voice. Maya hesitated for a moment. Her arms were sore, and she hadn't eaten properly all day. But as she looked at the man struggling to breathe, she felt a surge of determination. He needed her, and she couldn't say no. "Yes," she said quietly. "I'll do it." The nurse beside her helped set up the equipment. Maya rolled up her sleeve and felt the cold touch of the needle prick her arm. She focused on her breathing, trying to ignore the fatigue. Her eyes darted to the patient's daughter, sitting outside the room, clutching a small stuffed toy. She couldn't see her clearly, but Maya could feel the girl's fear. Minutes passed like hours as the blood transfused. The patient's breathing remained weak, but slowly, almost imperceptibly, the beeping of the monitor steadied. Maya kept her eyes on him, silently willing him to hold on. She remembered the promise she had made to herself long ago, to save lives, no matter the cost. Finally, the transfusion was complete. Maya's arm ached, and she felt drained, but the sense of relief that washed over her was immediate. The doctor nodded at her. "You did good. He's stable for now." Maya allowed herself a small smile. She had saved someone's life. Yet, even in this moment of triumph, she could not shake the reality waiting for her outside the hospital walls: her bills, her responsibilities, and the exhaustion that clung to her like a heavy blanket. She left trauma room 3 and found a quiet corner. The hospital buzzed around her, doctors and nurses moving like waves of energy she could no longer muster. She sank into a chair and closed her eyes for just a moment. She could hear the soft whimpers of the patient's daughter outside the room, reminding her that her work had touched more than one life tonight. Maya's phone buzzed. A text from her landlord flashed on the screen: "Rent is overdue. Pay by the 5th or leave." She sighed, running a hand through her hair. Life was a constant struggle, balancing compassion and survival. But as she looked up at the ceiling, she remembered the man on the stretcher, the child waiting, and the small victory that came from her blood and care. She whispered to herself, "It's worth it. Every single time." Even as fatigue threatened to drag her down, Maya felt a quiet strength settle in her chest. She had made a difference tonight, even if the world outside seemed heavy and unfair. She stood, straightened her uniform, and prepared herself for the next challenge. Because tomorrow, someone else might need her, someone whose life depended on the kindness and courage of a stranger. And for Maya, that was reason enough to keep going. The emergency room was chaotic, but amidst the noise, one patient stood out, though Maya did not know it yet. His name was Ethan, and he was a man who carried the weight of responsibility everywhere he went. As a CEO of a successful company, he had spent years making decisions that affected thousands of lives. But tonight, he was just a man fighting for his own life. Ethan had been in a serious car accident. His car had been hit by a truck, leaving him with deep cuts, broken ribs, and blood loss that had almost cost him his life. Paramedics had rushed him into the hospital, and the monitors around him beeped erratically, reflecting the fragility of his condition. Maya did not yet know who he was. To her, he was another patient in need. She watched the blood transfusion begin and felt a quiet hope. Her own blood now flowed into his veins, a small yet powerful gift. She thought about his life, imagining his family, wondering if someone would be waiting for him outside the hospital doors. And she was not wrong. Through the glass doors of the emergency room, a small figure hovered. A little girl, no more than 6 or 7 years old, clutched a worn stuffed bunny tightly. Her eyes were wide and anxious, darting between the door and the nurses moving inside. She did not speak, she only watched. Every so often, her lip trembled, and she pressed the toy closer to her chest, as if it could protect her father. Maya noticed the child immediately. Something about the girl's fear touched her deeply. She remembered the nights she had spent alone, afraid and uncertain, and she felt a sudden surge of protectiveness. She wanted to help not just the patient, but the little girl waiting outside, hoping her father would survive. The doctor overseeing the transfusion gave a quick glance at Maya and nodded. "Your blood is stabilizing him. He should make it through this." Maya let out a quiet breath, relieved. Her exhaustion seemed lighter, almost bearable. She had made a difference. But she could not shake the image of the little girl. There was something about her eyes, so full of worry and love, that made Maya's heart ache. After what felt like hours, though it had only been minutes, the monitors steadied. Ethan's breathing became stronger, his color returning slightly. Maya felt a small sense of victory. She had done her job, but she also realized that her actions had reached far beyond the hospital room walls. She had given not just life, but hope. Once the transfusion was complete, Maya's shift was almost over. She washed her hands, wiped her face, and tried to prepare herself to leave. The hospital was quieting down, the rush of emergency fading into the slower rhythm of the night. But before she could go, she felt a gentle tug at her sleeve. The little girl stood there now, her eyes brimming with tears. Maya crouched down, bringing herself to the child's level. "Are you waiting for someone?" she asked softly. The girl nodded, pointing toward the emergency room. My daddy," she whispered. Maya smiled gently. "He's strong. He's going to be okay." The girl's lip quivered, but she managed a small nod. Maya realized then that her act of donating blood had done more than save a life. It had touched a family, even if she did not yet know them personally. Meanwhile, Ethan remained unconscious, unaware of the nurse whose blood now ran through his veins. He was a man used to control, used to making decisions that affected countless lives, but tonight he had been powerless. And that realization was not lost on him, even in the dim haze of sedation. Maya left the hospital that night, her steps slow but steady. The streets were quiet, lit by the soft glow of street lamps. Her body ached, but her heart felt lighter. She had saved a life, and though she did not know the man's story, she felt connected to him and the small girl waiting outside. As she walked home, she thought about the fragility of life and the unexpected ways people's paths crossed. She never imagined that a simple act donating her blood could ripple through someone else's world, bringing hope and relief to a family she had never met. Back at the hospital, Ethan's daughter sat quietly, holding her stuffed bunny close. She whispered a small, trembling thank you to the nurses, not knowing exactly who had helped her father. But in that moment, gratitude filled the room, silent but powerful. Ethan's recovery had begun, thanks to a stranger's kindness. And though Maya had no idea that the man she helped was a successful CEO and a devoted single father, fate had begun weaving their stories together. The threads were invisible now, but soon, they would draw the two lives closer in ways neither of them could yet imagine. And for Maya, that thought, the possibility of change, of impact, was enough to keep her going. Another day awaited her, another challenge, and she would meet it head on. Because sometimes, life asked for courage in the quietest ways, and she had given it tonight. The following morning, Maya arrived at the hospital, tired but determined. Her feet ached, her uniform felt heavy, and the weight of yesterday's long shift still lingered in her shoulders. But she felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that she had helped someone, even if she didn't yet understand how significant her action had been. Ethan, meanwhile, had been moved from the trauma room to a private recovery room. His injuries were healing, though slowly, and the pain reminded him constantly of his own fragility. Being a CEO meant he was used to control and planning, but the accident had stripped all of that away. He was reminded that life could change in an instant, and the people who mattered, especially his daughter, were what truly counted. When Maya entered Ethan's room for her morning rounds, she was surprised to see him sitting up, reading a book his daughter had brought him. He looked tired but alert, a small smile on his face. "Good morning, Mr. Ethan," Maya said softly, stepping closer. "How's the pain today?" "Better," he replied. "Still sore, but I'm managing." He glanced at her with an expression that seemed more curious than grateful. "And how are you? I mean, how did you handle donating blood yesterday after such a long shift?" Maya shrugged, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It was nothing. I've done it before. When someone needs help, you do what you can. That's all." Ethan studied her for a moment, noticing the tired lines around her eyes, the gentle patience in her movements. "You're amazing, you know," he said quietly. "I don't think most people would, or could, do what you did." Maya felt her cheeks warm. She wasn't used to praise, especially not from someone like Ethan. "I'm just doing my job," she said, though a small smile tugged at her lips. For a few minutes, they were quiet, sharing a peaceful space that was rare in the busy hospital. Ethan watched as Maya checked his vitals, refilled his water, and gently adjusted his pillows. Her attention to detail, her quiet care, it left him feeling a strange sense of comfort, as if he were finally being seen not as a CEO, but simply as a man who had nearly lost everything. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said suddenly, his voice low. "Of course," Maya replied, looking at him curiously. "How do you manage it all?" he asked. "The long shifts, the stress, the exhaustion, yet still care so much for everyone you meet." Maya paused, considering her answer. "I guess. I think about the people who need me. The ones who have no one else to help them. It makes everything worth it. Even when I'm tired, even when it's hard. I know that if I can make a difference for someone, it's enough." Ethan nodded slowly, absorbing her words. There was wisdom in her simplicity, a clarity he often lacked in his complicated life. He had spent years making decisions that affected thousands of employees, yet he had rarely felt the pure satisfaction of helping someone directly, the way Maya did every day. "I never thought I'd meet someone like you," he said softly. "Someone so selfless. It's inspiring." Maya smiled faintly, a hint of embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "I'm not that special," she said. "I just do what I can. That's all anyone can do." Their conversation was interrupted by a nurse entering to deliver medicine, but the connection lingered. Ethan felt a pull, a sense that he wanted to know more about this woman who had saved his life and yet carried her own struggles silently. "Maya," 2. Felt a subtle curiosity. There was something about Ethan, his quiet determination, the way he cared for his daughter, that drew her in. Later that day, Ethan's daughter arrived with a babysitter, clutching her small backpack and her favorite stuffed bunny. She ran to her father, hugging him tightly, her relief palpable. Maya watched from the doorway, her heart softening at the sight. She had helped not just the man in the bed, but the small girl who depended on him. "Hi," the little girl said shyly, glancing at Maya. "You helped my daddy." Maya knelt to meet her eyes. "I did. And he's getting stronger every day. You should be proud." The girl nodded seriously, pressing the stuffed bunny closer. "I am. Thank you." Ethan watched the interaction quietly, feeling a warmth in his chest he hadn't felt in years. He realized that Maya's presence in their lives, though unexpected, was already making a difference. He wanted her to stay, to be part of their little world. As Maya left the room later that afternoon, she couldn't help but glance back. Ethan waved softly, and she returned the gesture. Both of them felt a quiet acknowledgement of beginning, though neither could yet name it. In the days that followed, their paths continued to cross. Maya checked on Ethan regularly, offering medical care and quiet conversation. Ethan began to open up slowly, sharing small details about his life, his work, and his daughter. Maya, in turn, shared bits of her own world, the struggles, the exhaustion, and the small joys she found in helping others. Each encounter deepened their connection, building trust and understanding. They were cautious, careful not to rush the bond, yet both sensed that fate had brought them together for a reason. And as the sun set on another long day at the hospital, both Maya and Ethan felt something shift quietly between them, a sense that their lives, once separate, were beginning to intertwine in ways neither of them had expected. The next morning, Maya entered the hospital feeling weary. Her body ached from yesterday's long shift, and her feet were sore from hours of standing. Yet, she carried a quiet determination, the same determination that had led her to donate blood to a stranger the night before. She didn't know that act would start a chain of events neither she nor the patient could predict. Ethan had been moved to a private recovery room. His injuries were still painful, but his condition had stabilized. He was awake now, more alert, though each movement reminded him of the accident. Being a CEO had taught him to handle crises calmly, but this morning, lying in a hospital bed, he felt powerless. Life had reminded him, in the harshest way, that control was often an illusion. Maya approached his room quietly. Ethan looked up as she entered, a small smile appearing despite the bruises and exhaustion. "Good morning," she said softly. "How are you feeling today?" "Better," Ethan replied, his voice hoarse. "Still sore, but I can manage." His eyes lingered on her for a moment, filled with curiosity and gratitude. I wanted to thank you again. For yesterday." Maya shook her head with a light smile. "It was nothing. I was in the right place at the right time. You needed help, and I was able to give it." "It was more than nothing," he said softly. "I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you." "I don't know how to thank you." Maya checked his vitals, her hands moving skillfully over the monitors and 4 lines. "Just take care of yourself. That's enough thanks for me." Ethan leaned back against the pillows, observing her. There was something about Maya that intrigued him. She was quiet, unassuming, yet every movement was deliberate, every word thoughtful. In his life, he dealt with people who spoke for gain or appearances. Maya's sincerity was rare. It drew him in quietly but strongly. "I can't believe someone like you exists," Ethan said finally. "Someone who cares so much about strangers, who gives without asking for anything." Maya's cheeks warmed slightly. "I guess. I just do what feels right. It's simple." For a few moments, they shared silence. Ethan watched Maya as she adjusted his pillows and gently checked the bandages on his arm. He felt a strange sense of comfort, a calm that had been missing in his busy, stressful life. And Maya, seeing the man now awake and healing, felt a quiet satisfaction and relief. Her blood had saved him, but it had also connected them in a way neither could fully understand. The quiet was interrupted by a small knock. Ethan's daughter peeked into the room, clutching her backpack and her favorite stuffed bunny. Her eyes lit up when she saw her father awake. She ran forward and hugged him tightly, relief washing over her tiny frame. "Hi," the girl said shyly, looking at Maya. "You helped my daddy." Maya knelt to meet her gaze. "I did," she said gently. "And he's getting stronger because of it. You should be very proud of him." The little girl nodded seriously, clutching her stuffed bunny closer. "I am. Thank you." Ethan watched them with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. Seeing Maya interact with his daughter, seeing her care not just for him but for his child, touched something deep inside him. He realized that her presence in their lives, though unexpected, had already made a difference. As the day passed, Maya returned for her regular check UPS. Each time, their conversations grew slightly longer. Ethan began sharing small details of his life, his work, his daughter's school, the challenges of balancing both. Maya listened attentively, sometimes offering advice, sometimes just providing a quiet, understanding presence. He noticed the way she moved through the hospital, how patients responded to her kindness, and how she carried herself despite exhaustion. There was a quiet strength about her that left him feeling both humbled and inspired. Maya, on her part, began to see Ethan differently. She saw the dedication he had for his daughter, the tenderness beneath his strong exterior, and the vulnerability that the accident had revealed. She wondered how someone with so much responsibility could also have such a soft heart, and she found herself thinking about him even after her shifts ended. By the time the sun began to set, both of them realized something unspoken had formed, a subtle bond, built from trust, gratitude, and mutual respect. Neither rushed to name it, but both felt it. Maya glanced at Ethan one last time as she left, and he returned her gaze with a quiet smile. Their paths had crossed in a hospital hallway, but now they were entwined in a way that promised something more. Fate had begun to weave their lives together, gently, insistently, and without notice. And though neither fully understood it yet, both felt that their connection was only just beginning. Outside, the city lights flickered on, casting a warm glow on the streets. Inside the hospital, a nurse and her patient had begun a journey neither had expected, a journey that would test hearts, heal wounds, and perhaps, in time, bring two lives together in ways both miraculous and simple. Days passed, and Maya's visits to Ethan's room became part of their routine. Each time she entered, there was a small, quiet energy that lifted the room. The monitors still beeped steadily, but their rhythm now felt calmer, almost like a heartbeat shared between patient and nurse. One afternoon, Ethan's daughter came along, skipping into the room with her tiny backpack. She perched on the edge of the bed, her stuffed bunny in hand, and waved at Maya. "Hi," she said brightly. "Daddy says you saved him." Maya knelt to meet her eyes. "Yes, but he did all the work too," she replied, smiling. "He's strong, and he's healing because he tried." The little girl beamed and hugged her father again. Ethan watched the interaction quietly, a soft warmth spreading through him. He realized how deeply he cared for both the nurse who had saved his life and the little girl who depended on him. Once the girl left with a caregiver, Ethan turned to Maya, his voice quieter than before. "You know, you've done more than save me physically. You've made me see things differently. Life, the way I lived it, I've been too focused on work, on control. I forgot what really matters." Maya listened carefully, her heart softening. She could sense the honesty in his words, the vulnerability he rarely allowed anyone to see. "It's easy to get lost in responsibilities," she said gently. "But sometimes, It takes an accident or someone else's kindness to remind us what's important. Ethan smiled faintly. Kindness, like yours. It feels rare and important. I don't know how to explain it. You don't have to explain it, Maya said softly. Just accept it. Life gives us chances to help each other, and sometimes we're the lucky ones to receive it too. For a long moment, they sat in silence, a quiet understanding forming between them. There were no words needed to explain the connection they now shared. Ethan's vulnerability and Maya's empathy created a bond neither could ignore. I want to ask you something, Ethan said after a pause, his eyes meeting hers. Would you, maybe, sometime, come to my house? Not for work, not for the hospital, just for dinner. Maya blinked, slightly surprised. She had not expected an invitation like this. I don't know, she replied cautiously. I'm still adjusting to your life being complicated. And mine, well, it's not simple either. Ethan nodded, understanding her hesitation. I get it. I just wanted to ask. No pressure. Maya smiled faintly, feeling a flutter in her chest. She realized she was already curious about his life outside the hospital walls, and the thought of seeing him in a normal setting, not as a patient, felt comforting. A few days later, Maya found herself walking up the steps to Ethan's apartment building. Her hands were slightly trembling not from fear, but from anticipation. When the door opened, Ethan greeted her with a warm smile, and his daughter peeked from behind his legs, shy but excited. Hi, the little girl said softly, waving. Hi, Maya replied, kneeling to match her height. You're growing so fast. The evening was simple. Ethan cooked dinner while Maya helped set the table. They laughed quietly, shared small stories, and for the first time, Maya saw Ethan not as a patient or CEO, but as a father, a man trying to balance life and love in the best way he could. Later, they sat in the living room. Ethan leaned back in his chair, watching his daughter play with her toys on the carpet. He turned to Maya, a seriousness in his eyes now. I want to be honest with you, he said. I don't meet people like you often. I don't usually trust easily, but I feel like I can talk to you. About everything. About being scared, about failing, about wanting to do better for my daughter. Maya's heart swelled. She understood that confession she had been scared too, struggling with her own challenges. I feel the same, she admitted softly. I've worked long hours, I've struggled to keep everything together, and I didn't think someone would notice, let alone care. Ethan reached out, his hand brushing hers lightly. I care, he said. About you. About what you do. About who you are. Maya felt a warmth spread through her chest. Her fingers brushed his hand back, a simple gesture, but filled with unspoken meaning. They shared a quiet look, one that said more than words ever could. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt hope not just for recovery, but for life, for family, for love. Maya, too, felt the stirrings of something new, something that made her heart beat faster but also feel safe. The evening ended with a promise to see each other again, to continue learning about each other slowly, to let trust grow before rushing into anything. And as Maya walked home that night, she realized that her life, filled with challenges and struggles, had just been touched by something extraordinary. The accident, the blood donation, the hospital, it had all led to this moment. A moment of connection, of understanding, of something that might one day grow into love. And both of them, separately, carried a quiet hope as they drifted to sleep, a hope that tomorrow would bring them closer, a hope that life had more moments like this to offer. The days that followed felt lighter for Ethan and Maya. Their visits were no longer only about medical check-ups, they shared small moments of laughter, stories, and quiet conversation. Ethan felt a growing warmth whenever Maya was near, and she, in turn, found herself thinking about him even after long, tiring shifts. But life, as it often does, had a way of testing even the most fragile happiness. One afternoon, Maya was called into the hospital for an urgent night shift. Her fatigue had been mounting, and she hadn't had much sleep for days. She knew she needed rest, but patience came first, as always. She left Ethan's apartment quickly, promising herself she would see him the next day. Meanwhile, Ethan had a major work crisis. A sudden problem with a critical project required his immediate attention. The CEO in him kicked in, and he spent hours on calls and meetings, trying to control a situation he usually managed with ease. But the problem was bigger than expected. By the evening, Ethan realized he had missed a planned checkup with Maya. He felt a mix of guilt and frustration. He wanted to call her, to explain, but the phone slipped from his hand as exhaustion took over. He worried she would think he didn't care that he had chosen work over her. The next day, Maya arrived at the hospital, her uniform wrinkled from overnight shifts, eyes tired but alert. She went straight to Ethan's room, only to find him busy on his laptop, papers scattered around, clearly preoccupied. "Ethan," she said softly, stepping inside. He looked up, startled. "Maya." I'm sorry," he began, closing the laptop slowly. "I missed our time yesterday. I got caught up, it was important." Maya's expression was calm but guarded. "I understand emergencies happen," she said quietly. "But you didn't call. You didn't let me know." Ethan's heart sank. He hadn't meant to hurt her. "I know, and I feel awful. I didn't want you to worry." Maya looked away for a moment, her exhaustion and emotions showing. "It's not just about yesterday," she said. "I care about you, Ethan. And when I feel like I'm not a priority, it hurts. I've worked so hard to help you, and I don't want to feel invisible." Ethan reached for her hand, but Maya hesitated. He realized that his world, the demands of work, the pressure of being a single father, was clashing with the connection they had built. "Maya, I never meant to make you feel that way," he said softly. "You are important to me. More than I can explain." She sighed, a mixture of frustration and sadness in her eyes. "I know, but I also need to see it. I need to feel it, not just hear it. We both have our struggles. I understand that. But sometimes, I feel like I'm just a side note in your life." Ethan felt a pang of guilt. He had always been used to solving problems, but here was a problem he could not fix with money or authority. He had to earn trust and understanding, not demand it. "I don't want to lose what we have," he admitted, his voice quiet but earnest. "You've given me something I haven't felt in years: care, honesty, hope. I can't let that go." Maya's eyes softened, though her lips remained pressed in a thin line. "I don't want to lose it either," she whispered. "But we have to be honest about our fears. We can't pretend that everything is easy. Life isn't easy for either of us." For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of unspoken emotions filling the room. Ethan's daughter peeked in quietly, holding her stuffed bunny. She seemed to sense the tension but didn't speak. Maya smiled faintly at her, kneeling to ruffle her hair gently. "We'll figure it out," Ethan said finally, breaking the silence. "I promise. I'll make time. I'll show you that you matter." Maya nodded, letting herself believe him, though fear lingered in her heart. She knew that love and connection required effort, patience, and understanding. And sometimes, even the strongest intentions could be tested. Later that evening, as Maya left the hospital, she felt a mix of emotions: hope, fear, and determination. She cared for Ethan deeply, and she wanted to see their bond grow. But she also knew she had to protect herself from disappointment, from the possibility that his life, complicated as it was, might pull him away. Ethan watched her leave from his room, a heavy weight on his chest. He realized that his responsibilities had almost cost him something truly precious. He vowed silently that he would not let that happen again. He needed to balance work, fatherhood, and this new connection with Maya. The next days were a test of patience, understanding, and trust. Both Maya and Ethan learned that love was not just about feelings, it was about effort, commitment, and communication. Their bond, though challenged, began to grow stronger, tempered by honesty and a shared desire to protect what they had found in each other. And as night fell, both of them lay awake, thinking of one another. Fear and doubt lingered, but so did hope. A hope that even in a complicated, imperfect world, they could find something real and lasting. The accident, the hospital, the blood donation, it had all brought them together. And now, with trust tested and hearts exposed, they were learning what it truly meant to care for someone beyond the surface, to fight for connection, and to face life's challenges side by side. The days following the small conflict felt different for both Maya and Ethan. There was a careful awareness between them, a sense that their bond, though strong, needed tending and attention. Ethan's work demands continued, but he made deliberate choices to prioritize moments with Maya. Maya, too, carried a quiet hope in her heart, believing that patience and honesty would guide them through the challenges. One sunny morning, Ethan sat in his apartment, sipping coffee while his daughter played nearby. He glanced at the phone and saw a message from Maya, "I'll be at the hospital later today for rounds. Hope you're doing well." He smiled, replying quickly, "Looking forward to seeing you." And yes, we're both doing fine. When Maya arrived at the hospital, she found Ethan waiting in the lobby. He waved, and she returned the gesture, her fatigue momentarily forgotten. There was something in the way he looked at her, steady, sincere, and full of quiet appreciation, that made her heart flutter. "Hi," Ethan said softly as she approached. "Ready for another round?" Maya chuckled, shaking her head. "Always. But I think I'm ready for a little break too." Ethan nodded. "I was thinking, after your shift, maybe you could join us for dinner? Just us, no work, no hospital." Maya hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "I'd like that." The hospital rounds went smoothly, and Maya moved from room to room with her usual care and calm efficiency. Yet her thoughts kept drifting back to Ethan and his daughter. She felt a quiet anticipation, a sense that this dinner was more than a casual invitation, it was a step towards something meaningful. Later that evening, Maya arrived at Ethan's apartment. The apartment was warm and inviting, filled with small touches that revealed a father's love for his child. His daughter ran to greet her, hugging her tightly. "Hi. Daddy says you saved him," she said, beaming. Maya knelt to hug her back. "I did, and he's doing really well. You should be proud of him." Ethan smiled at the sight, feeling a deep gratitude for the nurse who had become part of their lives. Dinner was simple but full of laughter. Ethan's daughter shared stories about school, and Ethan and Maya exchanged quiet smiles, their conversations flowing naturally. After dinner, they sat together on the couch, the little girl asleep in her bed upstairs. Ethan turned to Maya, his expression serious but tender. "Maya," he began, "I want to thank you again, for saving me, for caring, for being here. I know life isn't simple for either of us, but I want you to know. I'm committed. To my daughter, yes, but also to what's between us. I don't want to lose this." Maya's eyes softened, her chest warming at his words. She had seen his vulnerability before, but now it was paired with determination, a willingness to balance life and love. "Ethan, I care about you. And I believe you. It hasn't been easy, but I want to see where this goes. Together." He reached for her hand, holding it gently. "Together," he repeated, a quiet promise that carried more meaning than words could capture. The next weeks were filled with small but meaningful moments. Ethan made time to cook meals with Maya, they went for short walks in the park, and he even attended some of her hospital shifts, quietly observing and admiring her dedication. Maya, in turn, shared pieces of her life outside work, her struggles, her small victories, and her dreams for the future. Ethan's daughter grew comfortable around Maya, seeing her not just as a friend of her father, but as someone who genuinely cared for their little family. Maya, who had been cautious at first, found herself feeling like she belonged, her heart slowly opening to the possibility of a permanent place in their lives. One evening, as they watched the sunset from Ethan's balcony, he turned to her, a gentle smile on his face. "You know, I never expected life to bring someone like you into it. But now, I can't imagine it without you." Maya's heart beat faster, a mix of happiness and relief. "And I can't imagine mine without you either," she admitted softly. They leaned closer, hands intertwined, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause. All the struggles, the fatigue, the uncertainty, they had faced them together and emerged stronger. Love had grown quietly, nurtured by trust, honesty, and shared care. In that moment, both Maya and Ethan realized that healing wasn't just about bodies or accidents, it was about hearts. And their hearts, once cautious and uncertain, had found safety, hope, and connection in each other. From that day forward, their lives intertwined in small and meaningful ways. Maya continued her work at the hospital, Ethan managed his company, and his daughter thrived with both parents of heart around her. Together, they faced life's challenges, not as strangers or individuals, but as a family bonded by trust, love, and the simple truth that kindness and courage could change lives in ways no one could predict. And so, what had begun with a single act of selfless care, the donation of blood, had grown into a story of trust, healing, and the quiet, powerful beauty of human connection.